Greetings all, welcome to episode 115 of Into the Necrosphere, and joining me this week to bask in the glory of what experts say is the greatest honor that you can possibly be or have bestowed on you in the underground metal scene are Cain Cressall and Tim Pope of the Amenta. They were here to talk about Revelator, the Into the Necrosphere official #1 record of 2021. We did a retrospective look back at the record, including a track-by-track rundown of the album, spoke about a variety of different topics. It is always great having these guys on the podcast. They've been on a couple of times individually, but it was good to have them on together. And whether or not you're a fan of the Amenta, you are going to love this conversation. Believe you me. If you're not a fan of the Amenta, of course, you do need to check your hearing because they are absolutely sensational. But before we get to that, a quick reminder, if you're new to the podcast, pummel that subscribe button into quivering submission on your platform of choice, whether that be YouTube, Amazon, Stitcher, Apple, and yes, even Spotify, as the cancel culture buzzards circle above the Joe Rogan experience. Freedom of speech is something that I spoke about on the show many, many times. It is one of the major topics of conversation next week when I will be joined by Brock Van Dyke of Panzerfaust. He was here to talk about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, politics, the zeitgeist, as well as the Freedom Rally in Canada right now. So that was a very spicy conversation. If you're into music talk, we went a full 1 hour, 10 minutes before we got anywhere near any discussion about what was going on with Panzerfaust musically. But it is always awesome having Brock on the podcast. And when I first started the show, that was one of the first conversations that I recorded. And he was on relatively early on in the podcast, but that was one of the first conversations I recorded where I felt like we really, really nailed it now. And it's still one that I get a lot of comments and a lot of feedback on, or a lot of positive feedback on to this day. So it was awesome having him back. And yes, we did talk a little bit about the new Panzerfaust record. So if you want the scoop on when that's coming out, what it might sound like, you will have to tune in next week. You will also have to stick around after my conversation with Tim and with Cain, because I'm talking about some new music by way of the new Negativa record, as well as a new record by Abhoria. And then I will also do my usual firm but fair critical analysis of the latest metal news headlines. And now that I have decided to stop being lazy and actually figure out how to play back desktop audio on OBS when I record these interstitials, I'm going to start doing a couple of reactions as I do the news as well. So if a band has posted a new song, we can listen to it together, and I can give you my view on whether it's good or whether it is a dumpster fire, like a certain legendary rocker's new single that I will talk about later on in the podcast. Also, remember, if you are not following me on social media, do so. And if you're watching me on YouTube, you will see that I'm wearing an understated but badass Into the Necrosphere hoodie, which you can procure for yourself on the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store. Link in the description to the podcast. Check that out. There are t-shirts, tank tops, joggers, hoodies, all sorts of cool swag there. And whatever ducats I make out of the sale of any of this merch does not go to maintaining my harem of hoes or my Ferrari is in the garage. It is to make the show look and sound better, and like I said, hopefully help achieve that long-standing goal I have for 2022, which is a couple of interviews and conversations on the road. One of which will hopefully be with David Gray of Accolade. But before we get to realizing those dreams, you have plenty to be excited about. Specifically this week, Tim Pope and Cain Cressall of the Amenta. When I was back in South Africa, I think the last day that we were there, it was 37 degrees in Cape Town. And like generally speaking, when it's 27 degrees in Cape Town, it's fucking hot. Yeah. But 37 degrees, it feels like the sun is boring through into your soul. Yeah. So yeah, I can't imagine what 43 is like, especially if you've got a warehouse job. And I assume from the wet hair as well, that's not just a look, it's dunking your head in the ice bath.
Absolutely. As soon as I got home, I just dunked my head in the sink. And here I am.
I thought you dressed up. I was thinking, fuck, I came all casual. You're in fucking stage gear.
Well, guys, firstly, congratulations. So just to give you the story, right? Because I was so when it happened and when I did the episode, I kind of stressed it a few times because I didn't want anybody to think that there was any sort of planning or any coordination. But I recorded the episodes with Mike and with Kelly on the same day, and they actually sent me their lists around the same day as well, which I hadn't seen, and I hadn't sent them my list by the time that they'd sent me theirs. So I get these two lists back, and on both lists, it's like, they obviously had different things, in the run up to it, which is exactly why I wanted them on the podcast. But on both lists, exact same album of the year. It's like that's firstly not one I was expecting. I mean, even though obviously I really like the album, but you very rarely will get that degree of crossover in a list. But secondly, I thought it was fucking well deserved. And I'm glad everybody's recognizing it. But I did want to say that from the off, so that you didn't think it was staged. But the consensus was pretty unanimous about Revelator.
It's so wild. That's absolutely wild.
Blew us away.
I think we are, if I'm not mistaken, coming up to we're coming up to 1 year now since the record came out, because it dropped on February 19th last year.
Yeah.
Which again, I mean, the part of what makes it wild is I do know, and I try and guard against it, but there is always a bit of recency bias. So the record that comes out at the start of the year, it's got an uphill battle to climb. Yeah. From the fresh and shiny things that come out in November, and the competition was fierce. You had Voices, you had Funeral Mist, and that Funeral Mist record is sick.
Yeah, it's great.
But I mean, the criteria for me was, what endures, and if I, when I'm having a particularly shit day or I'm rushing around and I'm like, I want to listen to some music, and it's what do you default back to immediately, and that's really what it came down to. It's like, what do I almost instantly put on without thinking. And it was always Revelator.
Wow.
But I mean, did you guys expect? Because Tim, I know when we spoke, you almost seemed a little nervous about the direction that the album was taking. Did you guys expect this kind of response? Because I mean, obviously, I know it's not just from me; it's from all over, and it seems to have grown as well the longer the record has been out.
Which, I mean, that's the best thing that can happen. That's cool. We were kind of. One thing we were worried about is that it'll come out and people might go, oh, this is cool, and then it disappears. Because there's so much music. And I know I do it. There's albums I come back to and go, fuck, I completely forgot about this. 8 months later, you go, I listened to it like crazy for 2 weeks and then never again. So the fact that people are still digging it is really cool. But yeah, you're right. When before it came out, I had no idea, and I'm sure you were probably similar, Cain. It had been so long since we'd done anything. So even releasing an album that we were kind of more of the same old, where we could kind of guess people would appreciate it, you still don't know whether people are actually going to care, because it's been 8 years since we've actually done anything. Sort of goodwill.
We're kind of preparing ourselves for worst case scenario, because after that long, and the fact that the sound has been shaped a lot over 7 or 8 years. We were well and truly prepared for it to be a bullet. It could have really just upset. I mean, the fact that each release the band has put out has been some kind of a backflip on its previous album. At least that's something we know people are familiar with. But this felt like altogether maybe pushing it too far. Possibly. We didn't really know. You sit too close for something for long enough and you start to sort of really lose perspective on how it's going to be heard by fresh ears. So, and we kept it. Sorry. No.
I was also kind of excited about the idea that it would piss people off. I was kind of curious to see. It's always funny when that stuff happens and people, throw their toys out of the pram and go, there's not enough blast beats and all that sort of stuff. It's actually pretty funny. It doesn't really matter, because it's not like it doesn't affect us in any way financially. It's not like all of a sudden, fuck, I can't pay off my house. I'm not getting any money out of this. So it's kind of, if we do something we really like that pisses people off, that is quite funny.
Yeah.
I think when I say anticipating the worst case scenario, that's not to say I was sitting with a box of Kleenex next to me, ready for the bad reviews to start coming in.
Yeah.
By any means.
Ready to start typing, hateful tweets at the people doing the reviews. I think one of the if I reflect back on it, right, I think one of the things that was done extremely well with this record was the build up, ahead of its release. Whether it's the visuals that had started coming out, and a lot of that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is DIY. It's stuff that you guys do, right? You don't have some sort of big team or Deborah Morty harness the powers of their massive marketing department on level 5 of the Deborah Morty towers. Again, when did that start to take shape, like the visual aspect of the record? Because it's what I've also loved about it is how consistent it's been. It seems to kind of everything that you see about the record, whether it's a music video, whether it's merch, whether it's additional artwork that's come out, and I know there's been stuff posted since on social media, but everything seems to kind of form part of a grand picture or grand scheme, which again I think is partly what helped the record land as well as it did, because the anticipation that all of that created, and I think the follow through that it helped create, I think was fantastic.
I think I remember it was March when we started chipping away at music video stuff. It started with a trailer that we put together. It was I remember it was in March, but when would that have been? It must have been March 2020.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah. And then we were sort of chipping away at these bits and pieces, these little mini projects, leading up to the release in February 2021. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. But it was that, to be honest, the idea was really that we're going to put out a trailer and then follow it up with a music video. If possible, it'd be great to do more than one music video, but we didn't know whether it was going to happen. But the response from the Sia Money video was so fantastic that we kind of thought it was worth pushing that last sort of uphill battle to just knock out a little bit more visual stuff to complement the release. So that's somehow we managed to scrounge a whole bunch of things together. So, but all DIY.
And most of it done by Cain too. It's like so at the time when we first started working on stuff, I think, was Eric still in UK at that point? Maybe he might have just come back, but we're all he was in the UK.
I'm pretty sure.
I was in Sydney. Cain was in Perth. So Cain was kind of doing it all by himself. And we'd have these calls and we'd talk on the phone, and Cain would say, "I've got this idea," and we'd go, "That sounds really cool." And then you don't really think too much about it. And then Cain comes back with this thing, and it's like, whoa, that is so much crazier than I expected. I remember having a phone call with you where you were talking about the Sia Money video and said, I rang up my relative and I got a baby. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And you worked a baby into the film clip. So there was all this stuff Cain was doing, which was amazing. It's incredible. So it's all not only DIY, but it's pretty much Cain DIY, 90% of it.
And it would. The only reason it was doable at all was because just by chance, Garth Hurley from CRT Films in Perth happened to just by chance get in contact with me in April. So just before I needed to start shooting this thing. I don't have cameras. I'm not a camera guy. I just write a big bunch of visual ideas that I want to somehow put together. And we hadn't really been in contact for about 20 years. He got in touch out of the blue and wanted to work on like an experimental animation video, because we went to school together and did a lot of crazy sort of dark art stuff in school. And he was keen to get experimental with some animation stuff. And so I said, that's all very interesting, but at the moment I've got somehow put this trailer together for an album that we're releasing in a few months' time. And he said, well, what are your ideas? Maybe I can do it. So I gave him a run through of the stuff that had been bubbling away so far. And he said, yeah, that's totally doable. You just let me know. You just organize the locations and all the logistical kind of things, and let me know when I can rock up. And he ended up bringing some elements to the story as well. He'd every now and then he'd have an idea and say, hey, look, I really would love to do some shots underwater. And I'd just go, okay, yeah, cool. I'm not sure exactly what you're visualizing, but if you're excited about it, I know that it's for a reason. So sure, let's do it. And any bits and pieces that he'd sort of dropped in along the way all just fell in very nicely, because I think our creative kind of our artistic kind of sense is very similar. So even if we don't see the same thing, we kind of recognize that, oh, okay, cool, he's into something here, so let's see where this is going to go.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading some of the comments on the Twine Towers video, with the maggots and all that sort of stuff, and loads of people were saying, this could fit in quite easily into like a full-length horror movie. I know the original picture of the face with the maggots on. People were like, that looks like it should be the cover to or the poster to a film. There's definitely like a really cinematic vibe to all of these videos that have come out for this record. And again, in keeping with what I said before around this consistency or this thematic artwork and things that have kind of sprouted out of the record, it almost enhances, and it definitely makes the experience feel bigger. As a result, it's not just an album. It's almost like this world that you get engulfed in. But has the thought ever crossed either of your minds to take that further? On the next record potentially. You think about Vride that did those music videos that they sort of they sort of pieced together into something full length for their last record. Would you see the Amenta getting to a point where you would do that? Obviously through your own style and your own imagery, your own voice.
Oh, absolutely. There was Tim actually had pitched an idea for a short film on
ages ago
during Flesh is Air, I think.
Yeah.
I think that I
think we wrote it and everything, but we just couldn't do it.
The porno stars that you wanted to be in it, they weren't available.
Ron Jeremy got in trouble, and then it was all off.
To cut
oh, dude, he's in a lot of trouble. But anyways, yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of been in the offing for a while.
Well, we'd love to do it. It's just, I mean, doing a DIY music video that carries well is kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because, like you said before, it's not like there's a studio putting a bunch of money down and then organizing a few things and then booking a date, and you just have to rock up and do a lip sync in front of a camera. It's like, okay, I've got this enormous list of visual ideas, and then you've got to go through each one, figure out how to do it. So what the location is for each one of those ideas that you're going to use, scout locations, lock them in. Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're not. How are we going to light it? How are we going to make sure there's consistency between, like, it? Halfway through Seeing Money, I started realizing, holy shit, I've got to stop thinking of this many ideas for one video, because this is just an absolute fucking nightmare to do with no budget or anyone sort of doing any of the groundwork. You just kind of, it's just one thing after another. So the idea, and that's just, we're just talking about a music video at this point. So a short film is a whole nother. I mean, the Twine Towers video went for 8.5 minutes, which is ridiculous to try and do a music video for a song that long. I should have learned from doing the Vermin video that we put out for Void. Yeah. I think that song goes for about 6 minutes, and it was just the editing process is just infuriating. You're just bored, shitless of it. Like I don't want to look at this shit anymore. I'm done. Can someone else just finish this off? Because it's
and that's the thing. I think anybody who's never done any video editing themselves doesn't realize what a fucking absolute ball ache it is. I mean, like even just doing the minimal video editing that I do for the podcast, I sometimes watch movies and I kind of go, I try and visualize what it looks like on, Adobe Premiere Pro or whatever they're editing it on, and I'm like, I can't imagine how shit this must be to edit this together. Like, I mean, it's like you're going to be doing, say you're doing The Irishman, 3 hours 14 minutes.
Yeah,
you're doing 5 minutes of that a day, if that. Yeah, it would drive me nuts. I don't think I could do it. I don't have the patience for it.
Thankfully, these ones, Garth did take a lot of the lead in editing. He did all the editing. I sat in for a few sessions in each video, which was mainly for very small detail things. But I think that's where he brought his real creative sort of spark to the clips, was that it was actually quite surprising, some of the shit that he came up with to make that stuff fit together, because a lot of that stuff as ideas on their own, they might, the raw footage might look good, but then trying to figure out how to actually connect it all together to create some kind of narrative or flow is, I wouldn't know where to start. Like I really wouldn't know how to start. So it was cool that he's very wired that way and just kind of went to town on it. And then, we sort of just pitched in with bits and pieces, and the video effects. So treating the clips, coloring and all the rest of it was just him sort of just going berserk, just sitting there and just, mad scientist mode, just kind of really just having fun with it and trying to do something that's going to stick in people's heads. So
I want to get back to See Money for a second, because that being the lead in single of the record, I know of a few people that were Amenta fans and kind of heard that and was like, well, what the hell is going on? Yeah. And it wasn't that they didn't like it, it was just that they didn't expect it. Yeah. Was that intentional, that you didn't put in one of the record's faster songs, and you kind of wanted to start off with that, the opening gambit being that curveball?
100%. I mean, there's no point in coming back after that long and just going, "Hey, it's us. We're still doing that shit you like."
Get some blast beats and some screaming.
You got to come back and cause trouble. I mean, there was another thing where that was we knew that would raise some eyebrows, but we also we were confident in it. We're like, that's a fucking great song. It was one of those riffs when we first came up with it. It was like, or when Eric came up with it, you could just tell it was like, that's going to be something fucking awesome. Even though it was completely different to anything we'd done, there was never any question about whether it was going to be on the album or not. It was like, no, that's going to be good. And so we were very confident to put it out and go, it doesn't matter. In fact, it's great that it's going to throw people, because it's a good song and I think it'll win people over, but it's going to announce the album in a different way. If we'd went out with like Soraya Stasis or one of the more sort of blast beaty songs, people would have gone, okay, I understand this album. There's not that mystery to it. There's not that excitement. Because I think if you can release a couple of songs or some little tidbits that throw people, and they know that we're this kind of, or have been this sort of very extreme blast beaty kind of intense band, and there's something that's a little bit more rock, for want of a better term. To me as a listener, that sort of stuff is where I start going, this album's going to be really interesting to check out. This is what I want to hear. I want to hear what they've done. So,
well, it's the closest to hearing Dave sounding restrained behind the drum kit that has probably ever been put to music. So, again, I think let's actually get into it, because I know I said to you guys before we started, I'm keen to sort of talk through each of the tracks and do a track by track rundown. But before we go back to See Money, let's start with the way the record begins, which is an apocalypsis. There's kind of a feeling for me when I listen to the song, and it was the first thing I thought about. It sort of starts it sounds very traditionally like the Amenta when it starts, and then about halfway through, it's just spins off into all sorts of directions, and you have that really kind of atmospheric, slow burning ending to it. But tell me, kind of the thinking behind the song. What your takeaway from it was. Am I reading too much into it in terms of how the song sounds or how the song was made to sound? With it, you almost wanted to sort of do that swerve with people, or remind people who you are at the start, and then do the creative swerve about halfway through.
It's funny you should say that, actually, because I think I only realized this before when we were talking about doing this, and I was trying to think of some stories that I could tell. But one of the things I remember about that song in particular is it was actually the first song we'd started for the album. So it was just coincidentally ended up being the first song in the album. But I remember Eric sent me the first riff, just an MP3 of it. And it was sitting on my computer up until really recently, and I got a new computer. But before then, it used to pop up all the time. And the file name was The Amenta Are Fucking Back. that was the sort of the working title of that song for a little bit. So it was like that thing where it's like, okay, here's something we can work with. And the working title of that changed, but it started with that kind of like, yes, this is a chunk, and it's probably something that was a little bit more familiar and all that sort of stuff. When we actually got into writing that song, that was probably that midsection came out of Eric and I kind of sitting around in his room, just thinking, okay, where do we go from here? What do we do? And anytime that happens, it's usually like, oh, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. And it was never a deliberate decision to go, all right, well, let's throw in this weird queasy ambient section. It was just, I've got this cool idea for a drum beat, and then, well, what if we had this bass synth down here doing this sort of stuff? And then you build up something. By the end of it, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool, and it flows well, even though people complain about a drop in momentum. But I like it. And
I'd say if you were a German, I like that. I like that title. Like, in fact, if I think about the song now, and you've got the drums, and then Cain screams, and the craziness begins. I mean, if you were a German thrash band, you could probably call the song "The Amenta Are Fucking Back" and get away with it.
Yeah.
So
that would have thrown people if we'd done that for this album.
Yeah, for sure. Cain, I mean, your takeaways from that song?
I think that's a song that was fairly. The shape of the song was from the early demo. I don't think it changed a whole lot. I think that was one of the more natural ones that were sort of between Eric and Tim, had fallen together fairly naturally. So I was kind of, I think I would have seen a fairly well-rounded version of the song as my first listen. So it wasn't like lone riffs and bits and pieces. I think the first demo I would have heard of it would have been fairly close to finished arrangement wise. So yeah, one thing that I did find interesting about that song, particularly when we were having to rehearse it as a band for the first time this year. Was it this year that we played?
No, last June. So
yeah. Time is not one of my greatest. Okay. So yeah, it's been a little while, but we played at Dark Mofo in Tasmania and had to rehearse songs that we'd been working on since 2013, but never actually jammed in the same room. Any of these album songs. So that was one of the songs we did play, and it was interesting. That was one of the most problematic songs to get working as a group, and it was interesting because I wouldn't have picked it, but particularly in that more atmospheric, dark sort of dropout in the song. The way that I'd kind of made sense of the guitar in that section in order to figure out how I was going to approach that vocal wise and melody wise for my vocal parts. As it turns out, to Eric playing guitar, my vocal writing for what I'm thinking of as complementing the guitar was kind of quite jarring for a guitarist that knows his part so well to hear that melody completely just made no sense.
Yeah.
And I think it was a fairly common thing in the jam room. Like, wow, this is just confusing and makes no sense. How are we going to make this make sense so that we can actually play it live? And we did. We figured out some kind of mathematical kind of solution to the issue, but that kind of really just poked out to me at how interesting this working relationship is with, the way something makes sense in one person's head. It's kind of taken in and manipulated and turned into something else that makes sense to me, but these guys get that stuff back and go, where the fuck does he get the idea to write that for that section? Somehow it works. So that's about all I have to say about that.
I as a compliment to you, and I did say this when you were on the podcast last time, but I really think on this record you have come into your own. I mean, I think it was always, you have always been kind of the definitive Amenta frontman as far as I'm concerned, but I think on this record, the performance that you've put in, and there's going to be things we'll touch on shortly, that'll explain probably my thinking more around that, but I think this is creatively, artistically, really your coming out party, if you will, as in like, stamping your mark on the Amenta's music in probably a way that you haven't done before. I think it's absolutely phenomenal, and actually it's a good segue into Seer Money, because I don't know how many vocalists would manage to make Kali Yuga, Roman Akalif sound pretty funky as far as like the way that you're phrasing it. Because I remember hearing that the first time, I was like, the fuck is he saying? Like, that sounds so cool, it sounds so hooky, but what the fuck is he singing? until I actually saw the lyrics. Because I talk about this so much in the podcast about wanting loving those vocal hooks, and how so many times, and it goes back to probably all the music that we grew up listening to. There's these moments where a vocalist will do something that's so rhythmic and so cool and so groovy that it makes the whole song just pop. That's one of those great moments on this record. Is the fact that, like I said, you take these very, very random lyrics, these lines, and you somehow just manage to infuse rhythm into them or groove into them. Just makes everything else just elevate.
Amazing. That is just incredible to hear that perspective as a listener being affected.
It's also a love of golden age of hip hop and hating more than anything in the world. One thing I can't stand in extreme music is what I call typewriter vocals. When it's like there's like especially death metal bands, it's like it's like, god, not another one of this.
And it has its place, but I'm absolutely with you. Sometimes you listen to a short section of a song and you can already anticipate where they're going.
The entire rest of the album sounds like.
In worst case scenario,
yeah.
So,
I'm from the mindset that the vocal, especially in extreme music, the vocalist is an additional instrument. So I want the same kind of rhythm. I want the same sort of punch from the vocalist that I'm getting from everything else. I don't just want vocals to be some fucking garbling that's layered over the rest of the racket.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is, you can, particularly in a lot of subgenres of extreme music, you can get away with being very formulaic with approach to that stuff, because that it works for a lot of people. And there's bands I listen to that, admittedly, there's band probably not so much these days, but every now and then certain albums come out, and I love that kind of primitive barking, kind of mechanical sort of approach to things. But for me, the things, and going back to what you were saying about longevity with a release, for me, it's always been it's always when there is a vocalist whose performance really affecting you on more than just a rhythmic or melodic sense, but actually like an emotional level. So, and that's something that pulls me in and keeps me coming back and coming back and coming back. And so that's something that I really love with my teaching, with vocal coaching. I love working on vocalists with that stuff, because it's so easy to fall into a formulaic kind of trap. But when you start sort of shining a light on what makes a particular performance really magic and affecting, and see that response in them, like, oh fuck, right. So it's not just the notes, it's not just the rhythm, it's some kind of other soulful kind of energetic factor or something, and getting people to give into that vulnerability of putting themselves out there and dropping their defenses, dropping their attachments to formulas and whatever else, and actually just going somewhere else with it, and letting themselves just really spill their guts in the performance. And when you can make that click with someone and have like a demo track, for example, of them giving a more mechanical sort of delivery of a line, and then have a discussion about it and show some examples and play some games with them and get them to sort of come out of their shell and think more in terms of voice acting or just kind of bringing emotion to the performance, and then getting them limber in that kind of area and tracking a quick demo of that, and then playing it back to back with the first take and saying, like, see, you can do this. Everyone has that in there, but it's just usually a really scary thing to dip into, because you don't want to look stupid. So it's easier to just keep it mechanical and about rhythm and melody, but I get too bored doing that, so I sort of am more than happy to go into other areas that sometimes work really well. Sometimes it's a complete fucking mess. But
it's like scraping. I think you get to that point when you can scrape away that layer of self-awareness that's detrimental to the creative process. You know, like if you were a little kid and the kid is in a play, you'll see one of them just gives themselves over to the material. I mean, Red Riding Hood, Wizard of Oz, or whatever they're in, and the other one is kind of like looking around, and my friend's going to think I'm an asshole. In a weird way, it's kind of the same thing, you know. It's
absolutely.
Especially when you're injecting that degree of emotion, you know, because we're all men, and you don't want to sound contrived. You know, you don't want to sound like you're trying to be James Blunt of the extreme metal world. But I think it's kind of scraping that layer of self-awareness away to a point where you can give yourself over to the material and actually interpret it in a way that is authentic to you and authentic to authentic to the expression that you, or that comes out of you as the lyrics speak to you. I don't know if I'm sounding like an idiot there, but you know what I mean.
100%, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned kids and that, you know, lack of giving a fuck about what anyone's going to think, and that is a part of it, a massive part of it. And there's actually some kids next door to us. One of them's got a fantastic scream. I love hearing this kid scream at his brothers or whatever. They'll be out in okay, let me put that into context.
I was just about to say it's going to be a blabbermouth headline.
That wasn't supposed to come out that way.
The Amenta's Cain Cressall. I love hearing kids scream.
They'll be out in the backyard throwing shit at each other and jumping on the trampoline, and there'll be this one kid, and it's always the same kid, and I'll hear they're throwing things at each other and getting carried away, and I'll hear this kid just like come out with these kind of things. Awesome. And I'll be in the middle of, you know, something, and just all of a sudden hear this kid just sounds like he's ripping someone's head off, and my ears just prick up like, oh my God, that was fantastic. I need to get this kid around to do some backing vocals for a song at some point. I love that tone that he's got going there. It's really cool. So yeah.
Have the parents ever wondered what's going on when you're like standing by the fence listening?
He's loud. Tim, you don't have to be out in the backyard to hear it. I can hear him from in here. Anyway,
Tim, you write the majority of the lyrics, right?
Yeah, generally, yeah.
So I mean, again, when I read a lyric, I'm too busy to indulge in lyrics the way that I used to. So again, when I say I actually paid attention to the lyrics on this record, it's a big compliment. But it's also because of how poetic it's written and how well it's interpreted by Cain. But again, when I read something like Kali Yuga, A Twist of Tarot Wrist, Our Future in Rose and Lays, The Hollow Ritual of Suffrage, Poison, Fight for the Right to Bear Arms. I mean, there's so much bundled into that. You've got history, you've got contemporary commentary, but it's done in such a succinct and such a poetic way. I mean, I'm in awe of it because I love great, well-written lyrics. I can be put off by very shit lyrics very, very quickly. I constantly joke in my news segment about, the typical, fuck all your politics, fuck all your bullshit type lyrics, because this doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. But your process when it comes to writing lyrics, what, are you thinking about a song? Are you just kind of writing stuff down and eventually making it fit? How does that work?
With this album, then, and generally never really writing to a song, because I've found every time I've tried to do that, it hasn't worked. Because in my head, I'm one of those fucking typewriter vocalists. So I'm writing lyrics going, bah, 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 and then I send them to Cain and like, man, that's you've only sung about half the lyrics. What have you done? Because he's singing like a fucking proper vocalist instead of some stupid idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. So I've since Cain started the band, or even before then, it hasn't really been writing 4 songs. It's been writing lyrics and then sending them to Cain, and Cain interprets them. And part of the process is Cain comes up with lines and we send them back and we edit lyrics and we work on that way so that we can get the most amount of meaning and the most amount of cool shit. The first thing that the song and the vocal performance has to come first. Yeah. So the lyrics fit that. So if Cain gets something that really works, then I go back and rewrite the lyrics. But the process for Revelator was different than any way I'd done before. I'd actually started writing lyrics during the recording of Flesh is Air. I think it'd been going for years. And I basically I carried a book around with me everywhere I went. And at that time I was going into the city to work, which is sort of an hour and a half train ride each way. And so you're listening to music, reading books or whatever, and you're thinking about things and words and puns and phrases and things would pop into my head and I'd write them in this book. But there wasn't any deliberate attempt to structure them in any way. It was just kind of write them down as they came. And then when it came on later to, okay, we need some lyrics, had this sort of book of phrases. And then I approached it less like I'm going to write a song about this, which I have done before, but it's not something that really interests me anymore. I'm not interested in like my topic for this song is this, and here I'm going to write some lyrics. It was more about I'm going to put these phrases up against each other like you would a collage, like an artist would a collage. You get 2 pictures, you put them against each other, and the juxtaposition of those 2 is a third meaning, which is quite interesting. And so I was trying to find ways to juxtapose these phrases that felt like they had some meaning that was separate. But there was a whole bunch of different stuff that went into there. One of them was I had this idea of writing lyrics which were a bit like a Wikipedia page, where you can effectively click on a word which will take you through to something else. So you can kind of have these words that are a hyperlink to something, to a theme or an idea that is relevant to the lyrics and relevant to everything, but it's kind of like something that someone can go, what does that mean? And they can look it up and go, fuck, I've never heard of that. And then that will color their impressions of the lyrics. So something like Kali Yuga is used in a couple of ways, but obviously the Kali Yuga is a Hindu end of a cycle kind of thing. But I know we talked about this earlier, but I don't necessarily like going through the meaning of lyrics, but to give you an idea of the process, something like Kali Yuga was chosen because the meaning of Kali Yuga, but to me it also sounds like Caligula, who was a decadent Roman emperor. So that I could use those 2 meanings and kind of play off them with the lyrics. So that sort of stuff was really exciting to me. I'm interested in the way you can present words in ways that they can be interpreted differently, and everyone who sits in front of them is going to read them differently and get something differently out of them, or different out of them. So,
and what's interesting is that they both both those meanings then can be translated not translated, but can be related to the end of an age, which we're almost undoubtedly in. And anybody who doesn't believe that hasn't seen the Island Boys viral video. Have you guys seen that, by the way?
No, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, dude, I need to show you at some point. It's one of the fucking most terrifying things ever. I think if historians ever were to take stock of, where Western civilization fell, and, in 100 years from now, they're going to go, like they talk about in, the fall of the Roman Empire, they refer to the vomitoriums and the orgy rooms and stuff like that. With this, they're just going to go, right, we found this Island Boys music video. We knew that's when these people were fucked.
Wow. So
I want to talk about one of my favorite songs on the record. And if I had to do a rundown of my favorite tracks of 2021, this is probably number one. Actually, I don't even think it would be close. Partly it's recorded extremely well. So, I often listen to it on my hi-fi, and I've been in, lots of hi-fi demo rooms where I've played it as well. It sounds phenomenal. It's the furthest you guys have strayed from the Amenta blueprint. And I'd also go as far as to say, lyrically, it's probably the most emotive song that this band has done. And that song, of course, being Silent Twin. Did you, when the idea was first floated to do a mostly acoustic track, did you kind of go, what the fuck is this? I'm not so sure about where Eric is taking the album anymore. What was your first response to hearing, the scratch tracks or the demo tracks for that?
The interesting thing is that track that you're hearing is actually the demo. So there's
really,
that. So that was something that Eric and I were talking about the album and stuff we liked, and we thought, we loved Turn Loose the Swans. And it was like, how cool is that album? It starts with this fucking 5-minute piano song before it even gets to anything even vaguely metal. It was cool. So we thought, let's do something similar. So I was tasked to go away and try and write an intro song. And despite being a keyboard player, I'm fucking terrible at piano. So I was like, right, I'll try a guitar. And that guitar riff, or that opening guitar thing was recycled from, there's a track called A Sullen Cremation, which is on I think it's the Teeth EP. So it's taken from the back of that. And I thought I've always liked that. So I built something out of that. But that was just recorded just to show the guys, here's an idea. Here's something that we could do. And the version you have on the album, I think we recorded a bit more noise at the end and Cain's vocals. And then it was given, Eric mixed it to fuck and ran things through pedals and things like that. But effectively nothing new was recorded. So it's sort of what you hear is not too far from what everyone else heard.
But so the Amentas, the Amentas, Nothing Else Matters was your doing.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
It's also when I listened to it for the first. Oh, by the way, and sorry if I offended you.
No,
a little while back, I had Alan Averill on the podcast, and I was talking about Dread Sovereign, which I fucking love. And I made a joke, and I said it's Ghost for grown-ups. So I was afterwards. I was like, should I? I don't know if he knows me well enough to know that I can be a bit of a silly goose from time to time. But that track though, Cain, like when I heard the album for the first time, because the first time I heard it was when Deborah Morty sent me the promo, and I don't very often, download or listen to promos, but like I listened to it for the first time and I was like, that's when the magnitude of what you had done vocally, like really, really hit me, because it's like, there is so much creativity going on in how you've reproduced these lyrics. And I can hear so many different influences on there. I mean, one influence I might be off on, was like not an operatic, but like a Queen type of influence, like almost like Freddie Mercury with some of the way in which those harmonies are layered, but just the whole thing from start to finish works so well. And weirdly enough, I mean, a lot of bands, as we know, leave the slower, more atmospheric stuff towards the end of the record, and this coming, sitting as the third track on the album, it somehow just fits in so well, because as much as it's slow and it's atmospheric and it's very acoustic, it sets the tone for the craziness that is to come extremely well.
Awesome. That's amazing to hear. Again, like just fucking incredible to hear, because we don't get a lot of very specific kind of feedback about particular songs. So this is really kind of interesting for both of us, I'm sure, to get this kind of direct discussion. Really, really cool. That was definitely one of the that was one of the songs I was probably most excited about to get to go nuts with. I got this demo, this guitar track, and just went, holy fuck, this is just a playground for some haunting, creepy shit, and I can't wait to experiment with it. So that was a lot of fun to play around with. And
I was about to say that is, like, as far as all the recorded stuff I've heard you do with this and your other band, that's probably the most, the biggest departure from your typical style. But there must be excitement in that, especially given, we spoke last time about some of the vocalists that you admire and people that you think are great. It must have been really fun to be able to maybe apply some of that thinking or some of, your you draw from a different well of influence to what you would typically do, right?
100%, absolutely. It's the kind of thing that I love to do, but it needs to be relative to what's going on in the music. So I can't just be treating songs a certain way because that's what I feel like doing. I'm the singer. I get to do what I feel like. Like, the priority one is complementing the music. So for me to have that opportunity to this is just a blank canvas with these really sort of dark haunting undertones there already, and to get to complement that and play with some of the immediate kind of ideas that were coming into my head vocal wise was just really exciting. So yeah, and there's little bits and pieces of similar approaches dotted throughout the album in little sections, but yeah, that was really cool for me to have this track that's just kind of open for that kind of approach. And so yeah, I just had fun with it, really went with my instincts, and I don't think that was one that there was a lot of mucking around with. It was pretty a pretty smooth flowing kind of just bang out what makes sense to me, and the other guys kind of went, what the fuck is that? I wasn't expecting that, but it works, so go team. And
then again, a standout lyric on that song, again, both in the way that it's delivered, and a lot of these, to give you an idea, so a lot of the time when I'm highlighting lyrics to you, it's because as I was listening to the music for the first time, there would be like a part that is sung, or and it's everything working together, right? So it's the melody, the music, everything, but there's like one particular part, like, what's he saying there? That sounds so fucking cool, and you don't immediately pick it up, and you go look it up. Which, a little bit is a little bit like I was, used to be when I was a teenager. So that, again, this record sort of elicited that same level of excitement in me. But the lyric that stands out for me on this song, will increase with subtraction, but combine zero sum, which is just such a brilliant way of saying, get the fuck out of my life, bitch. But yeah, just phenomenal record. Phenomenal song. And then you've got Psoriastasis, which is where, business picks up pretty dramatically once again.
Yeah, that one, we knew that was going to be a key kind of, I don't want to say bread and butter, but it's like one of the ones where, we can still bring the blast, was kind of an important thing in the album. And I think that one was, I think the demo of that one, Eric put together pretty quickly. So that was one that we kind of got one and was like, okay, there's a fucking song. That was pretty much there. And I think there was only a tiny bit of structural mucking around, a little bit of adding of some stuff, but that one kind of burst out the gates and went, okay, yep, that's cool. It was ready.
I was about to say, it's almost like a reminder to people that are listening to the record and are like, am I still listening to the Amenta? Like, hey, we can still do this. We just, we choose to deploy it more tactically, on this record.
I think it was a really important place for it too. I think because
we
spent ages with the track listing and all that sort of stuff and trying different versions. And I think albums have to have that push and pull and the ebb and flow and things like that. And that was, if we hadn't blasted, then I think things would have got a bit long in the tooth. And you've got to kind of have these peaks and valleys and things like that. It makes everything just a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm astounded again at how many bands don't seem to give a shit about about album sequencing and how the album flows and stuff like that. The very best records are the records that are sequenced in such a way that you want to listen to it end to end. It's an absorbing end to end experience.
Yeah, I think it's so key. I reckon albums that don't do that, I tend to just turn off. There's just nothing there.
Another thing. And I know you guys aren't a particularly hard touring band, so I don't know how much this necessarily applies to you. But one thing I was talking to Ross Dolan from Emulation about was we were talking about their new record and again how much more expressive everything sounds, and he kind of intimated that because they weren't writing on the go or writing on the road and really could just focus entirely on music, the connection that they had with the material was such that you can hear it come out in all of the performances. And when you hear that record, you'll see what I mean. But again, I kind of wonder whether I've noticed that with some of the real standout albums over the course of the last 18 months. COVID is shit and it's been horrible for everybody. But one thing that has happened is people have had an awful lot of time to kind of fixate on what they're doing creatively. And I do feel like it's led to just some phenomenal records. Even people that you talk to that you say, well, the music was written well before the pandemic. Yeah, okay, but you were still working on it whilst things were going awry, and you had that opportunity to sort of add an extra dimension to it, if you will, because you didn't have a huge amount else to focus on. In many cases, people were just sat at home.
Yeah, I think definitely that's always kind of been our thing, because we aren't, as you say, we're not one of the biggest touring bands. And personally, my enjoyment, I like playing live and it's fun, but my enjoyment comes from working on the music and recording and things like that. And I think that's probably similar for Eric, if I can speak for him as well. I think he's in a similar boat. I think, Cain, you probably enjoy live a little bit more because that's kind of, I guess, a frontman's thing. But it's something that we've always done, is just really just sort of shut the door and, okay, we're going to work on music. That's what we're going to do. And we don't tend to play live when we're recording albums. So we get to focus, which is kind of good.
Dark Mofo has been the only show that you guys have done for this record, right?
Yeah, we had a whole tour booked, and that was going to be the first show of them. And then all the shows got cancelled, all the borders shut, and couldn't go anywhere. So it's only Australia, but we had, how many shows was it, Cain? It was like 6 or 7? Can't remember.
Because we knew that there was a very strong likelihood that it might have got cancelled. Yeah, I mean, like everyone trying to book shows, no one's doing it without that in the back of their head, that this might not actually go ahead. So I don't think I meditated too hard on dates or anything. We'll just kind of, I'm just going to try and stay in practice, and if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, too bad. Was
Dark Mofo a seated show?
Yeah, it was. It's fucking weird.
It was a
theater. I was about to say, I can't. I've never been to one, so I can't imagine how weird it would be to sit there and watch a band. Where you kind of feel like I need to move.
It would have been weirder if it was a venue which normally has standing area, but this was actually a theater, so it didn't have that dorky kind of, we should be standing up, but we're sitting down because of... Yeah,
at least it was kind of like tiered and all that stuff.
At least it was actually a theatre. And I think that's the first time we'd played in a theatre, so it was actually kind of exciting.
It was
sorry, you were going to say?
The show almost didn't happen as well because of all the COVID stuff. Dave got stuck in Melbourne. We knew a couple of weeks before the show that Dave wouldn't be able to do it, or most likely wouldn't be able to do it. So we had 2 weeks to get Robin Stone, our drummer from the Flesh's area. He stepped in and did it in 2 weeks' notice, 2 or 3 weeks' notice. So
he's a ridiculous drummer, though. I mean, he's fucking incredible.
But even him, he flew in the day after the rest of us because we had to get his flight later. And there was all this talk about the border shutting, the New South Wales border, no one getting out of New South Wales. So there was points there we were like, maybe we won't have a drummer today. But he turned up and we managed to get it done, which was good.
Yeah. What was it? People being seated? I mean, how was the response to the band? How was the response to the music? I mean, it must impact the energy levels from the audience.
What I found, sorry, Cain, I'm just going to jump in.
No, go for it.
Let me talk again. One thing I found really bizarre, which was great, but also really strange, was how into it people got in their seats. So there's one person that I feel I need to shout out because he's, I think, up there in our biggest fan lot is this guy called Christian, who I could see him sitting like he was pretty much directly in front of me, and he was having the time of his life in his seated position, singing lyrics, headbanging, having a great time. And so people were enjoying it, and it was sort of, there was still an energy there, but it was weird for me personally, just sort of seeing people sit. Everyone's exactly where they were when you last looked up.
Yeah. I talk about this a lot. Like, I think the first time I ever saw Slayer, my cousin was with me, and he had this canary yellow T-shirt on. And when the band started playing, you literally just saw him pop up in different corners of the London Astoria every 5 seconds. You, Cain, you were going to say?
What was I going to say? I was going to say I think we have a lot to thank for the fact that we were on late. It was very late, so everyone had been well and truly making the most of the bar throughout the festival, and by the time that we went on, no one seemed to really care too much that they were sitting down. They were sort of making the best of it, so that was very strange, but really cool as well.
So then we move on to what I think is the most, if I had to use a word, dramatic song on the record, the one that's kind of the most, like there's a real high drama to the song in a fantastic way, and it doesn't surprise me that, you use that as inspiration for a music video. But Twined Towers, track number 5. Talk to me about that.
That was another one that Eric had written the structure for. So most of that, I think, he presented, and the intro section, which is all the effects and all that sort of stuff, in the original demo was all a guitar playing that riff that goes for quite some time after that. And even though it was this sort of thing that repeated and it was, quite long, it just had this magic. You could tell that it was just this, there was something there. It was so bizarre. Normally with our demos, a lot of it's imagination. It's, a really skeletal, one guitar, drum machine. Here's an idea. What do you think? That one just almost straight away, it was like, fuck, this is massive. This is going to be huge. And then from there, it was a process of kind of a slow change into the song it became. But one of the key things I remember is very early on in our demoing of vocals and things, Cain sent a track back which had this little falsetto thing in it, which is still on the album, was this falsetto line. And that was the thing where, personally, I heard that and went, fucking hell, that's different. That's cool. And for me, that was the point where it's like, this is the kind of stuff the album needs. And Cain was bringing all this stuff to the table anyway, but it was just kind of a thing of, all right, that's a new sound for us. That's cool. And so that song, I think, is special for a lot of reasons. But for me, that's the one where the album started to really take shape.
Cain, your memories or your thoughts on that track?
Trying to think. All I can think about is putting that fucking music video together, because that's.
I was just about to say. I mean, you probably you have a different kind of connection to it because you've also sort of visualized something to go with it as well.
Paste you associated with it.
There's the song has a lot of sort of sections. It's not like it's a what's happening from the beginning of the song. It's got that really exaggerated it's kind of cinematic build, super slow build into, you don't really know where it's going to go. And that would have been, I'm sure that must have been one of the more exciting songs for me to experiment with, because it is made up of all these different parts. So that's always, more exciting than verse, chorus, verse, chorus, rinse and repeat kind of deal. But yeah, as far as the writing, recording, I struggle to remember too much from that because it was a while ago, and I've still got that those video shoots stuck in my head of handling redback spiders and trying to get them to fucking behave properly on camera. And
bro, there's no fucking way I could do that. My girlfriend's terrified of spiders, so I always have to kill them. But it's like I'm not a fan.
I used to be like that with redbacks. As soon as they start sort of popping up around the place, I'll be out there making sure everything's sprayed to fuck. But after doing that music video, it's like I've kind of become friends with them in a way. So now when I find them, I haven't got the heart to spray them or squash them anymore. So I'll collect them and take them down the road to an open space area and let them go where I let those ones go. It's just kind of a thing now.
Toss them over the wall to hear that kid screaming again.
He won't be screaming long if I throw one of them at him. Yeah. Anyway.
So the next, there's Parasite Lost, and again a track where there's a couple of standout lyrics for me, and one in particular, towards the end of the track. What rumor of the host does the tumor boast? Which is just pure fucking brilliance, mind-bending shit that you kind of read, and then when something rhymes perfectly, it's like your brain almost tells you, okay, it definitely makes sense, and then you read it again, you're like, okay, but it's not. It's very abstract, which again is my favorite type of lyric. But another one of those moments that just comes screaming out of the record because of how the lyrics are written, how they performed, how everything musically is working together when that piece on the song comes up. But again, floor is yours on talking about that track in more detail.
Yeah, that one, I think of the lyrics on the album, that's one of the ones I like the most. There's a lot in that, and that is a cool line. I've always liked that one. In terms of musically and things like that, I remember that being one song that Eric and I did pretty much together. So certain songs we wrote like really together in a room. And that first riff, I have a very kind of strong sense memory of making that, because I can taste the beer we were drinking when we were doing it. And it's one of those things where I think you really see the alchemy of working with someone. So it started, if I remember correctly, and I could be remembering it incorrectly, I had this idea of I want to do a beat, like almost like a Godfleshy kind of post-punk beat and a bass thing. So this beat and bass thing, and that's going to be this kind of like punchy post-punk bit. And so I kind of programmed up something, and as always, it's never what you think it's going to be in your head. It already had this different thing. But then Eric came in with the guitar and he laid this sort of bed of like almost noise over the top, and the whole thing changed. And it was one of those moments where you go, there is a reason why we collaborate. This is magic. I would never have come up with that to put over it. It's something that you see someone doing, it's like, fuck, that's magical. And that song came together relatively quickly for us as well. I think we did that in a couple of nights, drinking the entire time. But it was one of those ones that you can really, really remember, and it was quite special.
When it comes to writing lyrics, how self-critical are you? Because in the extremely limited experience that I've had of doing that, part of why I probably never ended up doing music myself is because every single thing I wrote, whether lyrics or music, I would listen back to 2 days later, and I'd just think this is fucking awful, and I would just scrap it. But how self-critical are you, during that writing process, particularly when it comes to lyrics?
In the past, I've been very self-critical. I think not, and what sucks for me is that not necessarily at the time. It's only a couple of years later you read back and go, fuck, that's shit. What was I doing there? That's a shame. Not about any of our songs.
I thought that was really good. Once upon a time. Yeah.
It just sort of, I think time ruins things and overexposure and things. So actually one of the reasons why I wrote the lyrics to Revelator the way I did was I wanted to remove myself as much as possible from the process of writing them. So they're reading them again, they're still surprising to me. So rather than, the idea was, because I wrote them over time and wrote these little phrases, I couldn't even remember half the time what the fucking original thing was about. It was just this sort of word shape or idea that when I put it together with something had another meaning. But the idea would be that I wouldn't have this, that kind of historical weight behind it where I'd go, that's what I meant, and I didn't express that as well as I wanted to. I wanted to keep things a little strange for myself. So this time, I'm hoping, so far it's okay. I'm hoping there's not things that I look back on and go, that's a bit fucking naff. And so far it's kind of going all right. But I think one of the cool things about doing it this way is a lot of the editing happened in the process, because I'd walk around with these phrases in my head, and something like what rumor of the host is the tumor boast. I think that went through a bunch of iterations in my head before I even put it to paper. So whereas before I would write that down and that's in a song and then we'll sing it and see what happens. Now it was kind of like I'd workshop it in my head on my train ride. And once I got to something that was like, that's pretty cool, write it down. And then forget about it. And then come back to it, 4 years later and try and work out what the fuck I meant.
You know how creativity works as well. Like I find, for example, if I go outside and I take a walk, like if I'm stuck on a work problem as an example, and I need a creative solution for it, if I go out and I take a walk or I go to the gym, normally that's when the ideas come, and I always like tap it down on my phone or whatever the case may be. And it's been like that with the podcast as well. If I'm thinking about something to do or whatever the case may be, if I'm just sitting at a chair trying to focus on getting the problem solved, I generally can't do it. There has to be movement or something going on around me for me to kind of get to that point. But you touched on another thing that I've always found interesting too, especially about music, is how music ages. Because I still can't unravel the mystery of why a record from 1991 can still sound so fresh and so great, and a record from 2004, can sound like a total piece of shit. You listen back to it and you go, why did I like this crap when it came out? It's fucking awful. I mean, that's just kind of a side observation, but I don't see that happening here. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that's been so great about seeing the response to Revelator has been the fact that, frankly, I was a fan from Acasis. I've followed the band's journey through every single record. I'm always excited by the fact that there's going to be something different coming my way when I put on an Amenta record. But I really feel like you guys got your comeuppance on this album. There's the recognition that you probably should have been getting 20 years ago is finally here now, and it's on your most ambitious and your most experimental record to date as well. So you've kind of also brought it from your end.
Yeah, that's cool. That'd be the perfect marriage. If we can be as weird as we like and people dig it the most, that's fucking great.
So again, if we talk about sequencing, I never knew until I saw it on Metal Archives, because I've always listened to the record on Qobuz or on the promo that I got from Debo Morty, but I didn't know that the album was split over 2 discs, and that you've got Wanderlust, Overpast, and Pass Over on the second disc. And again, was that intentional? Because it almost kind of feels when I since knowing that, I do kind of feel like there's Parasite Lost builds up to this huge crescendo, and then there's kind of the exhale at the end with those 3 tracks. Is that reading too much into it? Was that the intent?
It wasn't. It wasn't actually intentional. It was sort of. I think it's probably because of the way we structured the ebb and flow, and just coincidentally happened. But that's for the vinyl rather than the CD. It was kind of when we got it made, they said, all right, you got to, because of the basically the amount of bass and all that sort of stuff, you can't really fit it on one LP. It's got to be a double LP if you're going to do vinyl. And thankfully, DMP are pretty good with that sort of stuff, and they didn't even flinch. So it became, all right, we've got to split this into 4 bits. And coincidentally, the 4 bits that it's split into, I think, are the perfect movements to appreciate the album. So I never thought about this at the time, but when we actually created the LP track listing, to me, that's the definitive way to listen to it. The fact that you even have to get up and turn over to listen to the next movement, I think works really well, because it really does split things into these kind of these chapters.
Yeah.
Flow excellently, coincidentally.
And those last tracks, Cain, any kind of commentary on them specifically that you wanted to highlight? Whether that be Overpassed or Passover.
To be honest, I haven't even listened to the album on vinyl. So that, as Tim's explaining this about the chapters, I'm kind of imagining how that could work really well. But to be honest, I couldn't say from experience whether that's the case. But and also the fact that we've never played any of those songs as a band. They're the ones that I have sort of less solid kind of. To be honest, I'm trying to think of how they go as we're talking about it. I remember the last track has
what's that again?
The last track has more clean vocals in it, and the tracks before it are less. That's kind of my recollection. That's about all I've got in my cooked brain in my skull is managing to bring to the forefront at the moment. But have you got any more specific questions that might trigger some kind of?
Well, I was going to talk specifically to the last, credited lyric on the album, which is "I smear my prayer crosswise on the door." I think Mike would describe that as not life positive, but it's kind of in a weird way you can. It's that ambiguity where you could potentially see that as being ending on a slightly hopeful note, but at the same time, it sort of depends on which way the wind is blowing. It could also be something very grim. You're closing the door because whatever's about to happen outside is even more horrible than you can imagine. But again, talk to me about that lyric in particular.
Well, that one was, once again, I don't want to get too deep into meaning, but obviously the song's called Passover. Spelled a different way, and Passover being the holiday that celebrates the saving of the Jews from the angel of death.
One of the Egyptians. Sorry, you're right. The angel of death. And
so the way the Jewish people were saved, apparently according to the Bibles, is they smeared a sign on their door with lamb's blood. So it's the idea of, I guess, being a sacrifice that isn't a lamb, but it's kind of. I wanted the album to end on that kind of note, which it is kind of a bit horrible. And I remember I fought for that song to be last. I don't know if I had to fight all that hard, but it was one song was like, that's got to be the last one. We've got to end on that note where everything just fades into nothing. And it's like almost like an anticlimax. To me, that's the perfect way to end the album because it's such a fucking dark and horrible way to end. It's not like this big triumphant moment. It's just everything might be shit. And like I think that sums up the album.
Not life affirming.
Yeah.
So, firstly, I must ask, I sincerely hope we're not going to be waiting 7-8 years or whatever it was for another Amenta record. What are the plans for the band right now? I know you would probably love to go and play some shows to get this music out there, but where are you guys at now in terms of the future of this band?
We're working on some stuff at the moment, which is it's not a new album. I keep saying it's not a new album. But it's something. There's some more music that should be out relatively soon, which is probably 99% done, not far off. And then there's obviously the whole bunch of stuff that goes in before we release it. But there's some stuff there which I think will be interesting for people. It's kind of it's separate to Revelator, but it's kind of informed by it. But then after that, then it's kind of like, all right, let's try and write some stuff again. So the last time that big gap happened for a million reasons, but ideally we'll have something before then. But like anything, we don't want to force anything. I'd rather not release something than release something that's kind of subpar. I don't want to just release another album to be another album. I think it's got to be something that feels important, and this album felt important.
Yeah.
So it's got to be something like that for me, I think. But I mean, the plan is definitely to do them.
You must, I mean, and you must also feel, and I get that sense from both of you anyway, but you must feel invigorated about the Amenta based on, people's response and also how this record has ended up sounding. I can't imagine not listening to it if I were in your shoes and not being immensely proud of what you've done. And if not, you should be. So, I as I said, I get that energy from you that there's a real sort of reinvigoration about the Amenta.
Yeah, for sure. For me personally, yeah, I'm more proud of this than any of the albums we've done. I think this is the album we always kind of wanted to do but didn't know how, or we weren't ready to do, or something like that. So for me, it's like, yeah, this is a big tick for us. So I'm definitely feeling like we're hitting a purple patch. We can start doing some pretty cool stuff. It's who knows what'll happen, but at the moment, it feels pretty good to me.
Cain?
Yeah, it's, to be honest, it's more this kind of feedback that actually puts things into perspective more than anything, because I think sitting so close to a project for as long as that one did take to sort of be completely realized, it's easy to lose sight of it's tricky to see the forest for the trees. You kind of I'm sure every member of the band has at some point through working on that release scratched their head and thought, is this actually good, or is this just fucking a waste of time? Like it so many times we've just gone, I have no fucking clue whether this is worth pushing to finish. Like maybe we're just too old for this shit now or something. I don't know. So this kind of response is just worth its weight in gold for me, because it kind of changes the whole picture to be, I did something that has some kind of value because it's affected people. And that's kind of the biggest win for me is for people to be affected by something that I've done. If they're really affected by it, that in itself is like, life is good because you can do things and it can create that kind of response in people. And that's kind of, it's that feedback loop, re-energizing itself through release after release that keeps us going. So thankfully this has kind of affected people the way it seems to have, because it definitely fills me with some kind of okay, cool, so just keep doing more of that and follow your instincts and all of that business. So
I the whole world, I think, is constantly looking for inspiration, and as we see all the time, many of them, particularly those on TikTok, find it in the wrong places. But I think where I felt most chuffed for you guys was as I was recording the second part of my best of 2021, and we were talking about Revelator. Mike mentioned, that he found listening to you guys very inspiring, and for me, to hear an artist that I really, admire talk about other artists who I really admire in that way, and it not being the usual, same thing. We're all, everyone, got into this music through Dear Side, Morbid Angel, et cetera, et cetera. That sort of stuff that's table stakes. But when it's a band like the Amenta, that I've always kind of felt was this undiscovered gem, and I hear somebody like Mike, whose music I absolutely love as well, say that. I mean, that kind of warmed the cockles of my heart, and I hope it's probably the best way to close off the conversation as well. But I certainly hope that it had the same effect on you.
Actually, that reminds me of one moment where he'd said something about he kind of related the listening experience to, in the past, listening to a David Bowie album. I think he mentioned at one point, and that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I just thought, you're fucking joking me. How could something that we've created affect somebody in a way that, like, because that makes sense to me. and the same, the fact that you could drop a name like Freddie Mercury into a discussion about one of our songs is just, my brain sort of can't really compute what I'm hearing. Like these are musicians that really have created such a deep experience in the releases that they've put out, and I know what that feeling is. I've listened to those albums, and I've gone to different worlds, really just becoming totally submerged in those albums. So yeah, just mind blowing. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I was just one last comment on going to a different world. I was going to make a joke and say the closest Dave Haley has ever come to sounding like Full Rudd is on See Money.
That was one of
gentlemen,
the
thank you.
things about actually one thing I really enjoyed was the fact that hearing. I remember the first time we heard some of Dave's tracks, and I remember that excitement because we'd got to a point where we'd been, using demo program stuff as like just a very rough baseline for what was going to happen drum wise. And he just brought this massive, like you say, it's an approach that we haven't heard in any of his previous work. So that actually brought a new excitement to something that we were all at a point where we were kind of pulling our hair out, not able to figure out whether we were doing something worth doing or not. And then we heard those drum tracks and went, holy shit, this has just kind of reshaped things again. And now all of a sudden I'm excited again to finish this thing. So yeah.
He is a man amongst men, absolute badass guy, and one of my favorite drummers on the planet. Gents, thank you so much for your time. Always a huge pleasure catching up with you. And again, well done. You won possibly the greatest accolade there is to get in music. So if you do hang it up, you will at one point Into the Necrosphere's album of the year. But I hope I'll catch up with you all again at some point down the road. Like I said, if all goes to plan, definitely in the next 2 years, provided all the restrictions lift and the Great Reset doesn't destroy all of our lives, I may well be making my way to Australia for a couple of weeks to visit a friend there, and I'm for sure going to try and do the rounds and come and say hello. I'd love to hang out, have a beer, talk shit.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. So, and obviously the offer is always there if you want to come and barbecue and blast some stuff on the hi-fi and things like that if you're ever in the UK. So, all right, we'll talk again very soon.
Yeah, thanks,
Cheers,
man.
man. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much. Very appreciated.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much to Tim and to Cain for coming on the podcast. And I, if it wasn't clear enough over the course of that conversation, I genuinely love these guys, both as musicians and just as artists and guys, men that I can admire and I can get on with. It's an absolute pleasure having them on the podcast, and I hope you guys really enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed recording that conversation. But you just listened to a track called Passover. That's off of Revelator, the new Amenta record, or the latest Amenta record, I should say, available on Deborah Morty Records. The number one album unanimously decided upon by the Council of Wise Men and Women who decided on the Into the Necrosphere Albums of the Year. So Kelly T, Mike Hill, and myself all decided best record of last year, and very well deserved. These guys are fucking outstanding. I've been a fan of theirs ever since Ocasis. And so to hear them do an album like this was amazing, and to get to talk to them about the album to the depth that I was able to was brilliant as well. So hopefully they will be back on again at some point down the line, and hopefully I get to meet these guys when I finally make my way out to Australia. So we'll have to see what happens. I want to talk about some new music now, specifically to start us off with Abhoria, a new project featuring Trevor Ports of Ashen Horde, who do some very interesting progressive kind of blackened death metal. Abhoria is far more straightforward than Ashen Horde, if you are familiar with them. They have just put out their debut on Prosthetic Records. And for the most part, the 8 tracks that you will find, or I should actually say the first 7 tracks on this record are very straightforward, very aggressive, very precise, I think is the right word to use here. Very precise black metal, heavily influenced by second wave bands, particularly Mayhem and Emperor. I hear a bit of Wretched End style riffing on there as well. And just as a side note, Wretched End is a band I'm a huge fan of. I think they don't get nearly enough love, and I think somebody needs to stop those Emperor royalty checks to Samoth until he writes a new Wretched End record. But yeah, I definitely get a sense of some Wretched End style riffing on some of the tracks, particularly the Thorn and Byzantine Promises, but broadly speaking, very, very good. The performances are great. The songwriting is crisp. The production is very good as well. I definitely sense, or definitely what you pick out of the production is, a lot of air between the instruments, and really that kind of open, lush production that I tend to enjoy. Now, why I mentioned the first 7 songs and distinguished them from the last song is because the last track is really what makes this record. And, it reminds me to a degree about a album that Black Anvil put out back in 2017 called As Was, which is very good, very serviceable for the most part, but is absolutely crowned by a phenomenal song at the end called Ultra. And if I have played it on the show before, but if you haven't listened to it recently, make sure that you do go and listen to it. Abhoria is kind of the same thing. Very good songs, very serviceable black metal, as I said. And then they come screaming out at you with this track right at the end called Sunless, where there's clean vocals. There's actually not just clean vocals, but general kind of vocal experimentation. The riffs are a bit different. There's more use of melody. Dare I say there's more kind of progressive influences on this, albeit not necessarily as pronounced as Ashen Horde. But the song as in the main is just absolutely fucking astounding. And it makes me believe that if that were the direction down which Abhoria chooses to go, then this is definitely not the last you're going to be hearing of them. And I think they have a very bright future ahead of them. The song is phenomenal. The record as a whole, as I said, very enjoyable. But that song in particular, just speaks volumes to the amount of talent that is in this band, which is why I'm going to play it for all of you right now. So off of the self-titled debut, available right now on Prosthetic Records, this is Abhoria with Sunless. That is a song called Sunless by Abhoria, available right now on the record by the same name, and I will post the link to Abhoria's Bandcamp in the description of the podcast. So if you go and listen to it and you like the whole thing, you buy yourself some music, then make sure that Trevor and the lads know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you. I want to talk about some more new music now by way of Negativa out of Alicante in Spain, which immediately should make you know that this is not to be confused with the Luc Lemay of the Mighty Gorguts project of the same name. Negativa have been active since 2012. It is a one-man project featuring the mysteriously named DB, he of Dillerant and Haslich fame. And I must confess, I don't know either band. He's also noted on Metal Archives as being the founder and owner of the label Bile Noir, although when I looked into Bile Noir, it said that there are no bands currently signed on Bile Noir. So either he has exceptionally high standards when it comes to who he'll represent, or the label is dysfunctional. What is not dysfunctional is Negativa's music. So I mentioned that they have been active, or he has been active as Negativa since 2012. He put out a couple of splits, and then in 2014 put out his first EP entitled 01. He's since released an additional 2 full-lengths called 02 and 03, and this is his third full-length, confusingly called 04. Everything on the record is also numerical, so there must be some sort of theme around that, but since there's not a huge amount available online about this band, I'm just having to be a silly goose and kind of fiddle my way around the dark. Either way, the music is excellent. It reminds me a lot of it's like Burzum, or like early Burzum brought into a modern sound. The music is deliberately slow, ponderous, meditative. There are a couple of faster moments, but for the most part, it's about building atmosphere. Really kind of sense of true darkness, with these very inhuman sounding vocals buried way back in the mix. And I know that is not to everybody's tastes. There was a lot of static that came, not my way, but that came the way of Inferno when they released Paradema, which was a record I really liked. And a lot of people complain about the vocals there because they said, you can barely hear it. You can kind of barely hear it here as well. But it does somehow seem to suit the music and the overall vibe which DB is going for. I think the riffs are absolutely outstanding, and I think one of the things that he does very well is mix it up with, a little bit of cleaner guitar, or, a little bit of a break away from, these hypnotic melodies and these hypnotic riffs that he kind of has repeating through all of the songs. So it never feels like it's boring. And overall, across the course of 7 tracks, 40 minutes, it's a pretty breathless affair, but definitely one that I find myself going back to again and again, and every time I listen to it, I seem to find more about it to like. So I would strongly recommend that you check it out. Shout out to the great Nathan Glover of Gravier out of Australia. It was actually him that turned me on to this. He definitely knows what I'm into, and that man is a fucking walking encyclopedia when it comes to black metal, so he'll for sure be back on the podcast. But 04 is available on Mr. Chaos. Like I said, strongly recommended. I'm going to play the first track off of it for all of you right now. This is 23. Negativa with a track called 23 off the record 04, available on Mr. Chaos. As ever, link in the description to the podcast. So check it out if you liked what you heard there. I can tell you with a fair degree of certainty, if you like that song, you're going to love the rest of the album. All right, folks, as promised now, it is time for me to delve into the latest metal news headlines. All right, and first up we see that Cobra Spell launch opening track from upcoming EP. Now, I will stress Cobra Spell, not to be confused with Night Cobra, which features the great Christian Larson of Necrofire. I actually checked out that Night Cobra record today, and it's fucking excellent. Not really normally my kind of vibe, but really enjoyed it. Cobra Spell, on the other hand, I mean, it looks like they were all auditioning for a fucking Wasp music video in 1984 and didn't quite make the cut. But let's hear what Addicted to the Night, their first single, sounds like. So, opening riff is already absolutely atrocious.
It's getting darker. Now it is time to be awake. Just looking for trouble.
It's getting darker. Now it is time to be awake. All right. Let's see what other gems the song has to offer up.
And just some time to get away. That signs are turning on. He takes his chances, ready to go. Adrenaline is all we need.
Oh, fucking hell no. I love you guys too much to inflict that bullshit on you for longer than I have to. Also, I'm gonna just come out and say this. Because the next headline that I'm looking at here is Voivod streaming new music video. Marco gave me a lot of hate because I don't like this new album. I tried listening to it. I've told all of you that I like Voivod. But try as I might to get into Synchro Anarchy, something just is not sticking. Yes, the bass lines sound cool. I listen to it on my hi-fi and I listen to it on the headphones, but... yeah, it's not for me. Tristisha, new single online. It says here, while Swedish Blackened Doomers Tristisha are finishing the work on their new album Doomistic, they premiere The Crosses single as a second preview of the upcoming music output. Let's give this a quick listen.
I inverted minds and changes, but I have no fear to outlive. I don't crawl from the crosses.
I think the first indication that this might not be the best is the fact that on Bandcamp, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it says The Crosses Single 2022. You can't even spell the word single. That literally sounds... that sounds like my dad pretended to get drunk, because he doesn't really drink all that much, pretended to get drunk and is complaining about the weather. It's fucking dreadful. Oh, man. I mean, it started off pretty shit, but from there on out, it just got progressively worse. Let's hope Killing Joke can provide something a little bit more enjoyable. So it says here, Killing Joke releasing a 4-track EP next month. British veterans Killing Joke will be releasing a brand new EP, Lord of Chaos, next month on March 25th. This will be the group's first music piece since 2015's Pylon album. Below you can give a listen to the same titled open track. You all know I'm a big fan of Killing Joke, and many of the bands who have been on here are big fans of Killing Joke too. So let's give this a spin and see what it sounds like. So far, it sounds an awful lot like most of the stuff that was on their last record on Pylon, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I enjoyed Pylon, but yeah, it definitely has that vibe. Just Killing Joke being Killing Joke. And as I was watching this music video, because again, if you're listening to this on Spotify and you can't see what I'm watching, maybe you'll go and you'll watch the music video. But there's explosions and typical Killing Joke type imagery. I was just sitting thinking, if ever a band had been talking about some of the crazy shit that we're seeing in the world, for years and years and years before any of it happened, it's Killing Joke. So it feels to me like 2022 is a very opportune time for them to be bringing out some new music. But anyway, I'll shut up. Let's listen to the rest. That is fucking badass. I love it. Absolutely love it. So, yeah, like I said, starts off with that very typical Killing Joke verse. As I said, sounds a lot like Pylon. And then it has a very typical Killing Joke chorus, but with that just swell of discordant, off-kilter melodies. And you have Jazz doing, jazz, which is that, screaming on a note that he does so well. That is fucking excellent. I love that. I don't know what you guys think, but I think that is fucking brilliant. I don't know why they're only putting out 4 songs. I mean, and actually it's not even kind of 4 proper songs. It's just 2 new songs and then a mix and a dub. I do know that they're playing in the UK, or in London actually, in April. I think it's April or it's May. And I've seen them 3 times before. I've always been blown away. I think I may go there. And I'll check and see if Sam Loynes is going there as well. Maybe he and I can hang and have a couple of beers. But yeah, top-notch stuff. Fucking absolutely brilliant. I'll tell you something. Jazz Coleman is another one of those deeply underappreciated gems in the music industry. He has obviously his fans who love him, but a bit like Shane Embry, I think people are only going to realize what they've lost when that guy hangs up his spurs. And, he's not far off probably from doing so. I know he had some health problems, and I hope he's feeling better now. But the man is 61 years old. He's burnt the candle pretty hard at both ends. It amazes me when I see them live just how much energy the guy still has. And I tell you something else. If ever there were a dream guest to get on this podcast, I know we would have a lot of differences about a lot of things, but I'd love to talk to him. Anyways, let's move on. Night Rage, new song and lyric video premiered online. Not going to bother listening to that because I think we all know what that is going to sound like. Demonical Fallen Mountain single premieres. It says here, Swedish death metal masters Demonical premiere a lyric video for the first song to be revealed of the band's forthcoming album, Mass Destroyer, set for release on May the 6th, 2022 via Agonia Records. Listen to The Fallen Mountain now. Will I, won't I give this one a whirl? I think I shall. That opening riff sounds like it basically could have been taken off of any of the first 3 Dismember albums, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I mean, like, all the way down to the way the guitar sounds, that sounds just like Dismember to me. I'll tell you what I'm not mad at is this vocalist. You know, you can hear that English isn't his first language, but he still makes it work in terms of the way that he is, the way that he's phrasing his vocals, the rhythm he's putting into everything he's saying. I think that sounds pretty good, actually. Let's hear a little more. Yeah, I like that. I think that might be one to check out. I can't recall whether Kelly said this or not, or whether I kept this in the interview. But Kelly Schaefer, I know, had a pretty bad experience with Agonia Records. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Anyways, let's move on. Cali Reach, or what Kale Leach calling? I almost thought that was Cali Reach calling. I was like, Jesus Christ. How much are we desperately trying to come up with the worst band name possible? Hell Militia present Genesis Undone track. French black metal band Hell Militia are premiering the second new song from their upcoming record, Hollow Void. The track Genesis Undone is now streaming via the official Season of Mist YouTube channel, and if you stay until the very end, I am going to play out with it today. Because I've heard this and I really like it, so I thought I would share it with all of you guys, because that's just the kind of sweet man that I am. Now, I was talking about shit band names, right? This headline, Confidential. Drop new song. What's your band name? It's Confidential. The band photo looks like an ABBA tribute act, but they forgot to put on their wigs and their fake beards. I can't bear to even think of how shit that would sound. Despised Icon writing new record. Despised Icon's vocalist Alexandra Arian recently revealed that they are halfway through the writing process of their studio album number 7. Canadian deathcore Machinery put out their last record, Purgatory, in November 2019. I thought Purgatory had its moments. I feel like the more that Despised Icon has tried to go the route of traditional death metal, the less I have liked them. I'm not a big fan of deathcore whatsoever, but I did always like... I thought they did the blend of hardcore and death metal together really, really well. You know, they had, you know, those cool gang vocal bits, great breakdowns, you know, just a lot of stuff that I feel is missing now. But anyway, you know, let's see what they do when they make their next record. Okay, let's move on now to the Democrats' Guide to rock music. And because I'm a lazy motherfucker and I don't plan on redoing this video, I'm in my flow. I'm going to move the camera a little bit so that disgusting cutoff that you saw there is gone. Anyways, let's move on to Blabbermouth. As I said, Kelly Osbourne calls Slipknot Sid Wilson her soulmate, says she is deeply in love. And in 2 years' time from now, she'll make those of us who believed that was the definition of love question our very existence when they break up. Ice 9 Kills drops animated video for Take Your Pick featuring Cannibal Corpse's Corpse Grinder. Ice 9 Kills, another band who I won't listen to by virtue of their name. Watch Anthrax's Scott Ian play System of a Down's Bounce with his 10-year-old son. Told you guys the other day I saw them do Roots. That was very cool. Derek Green plays first Sepultura concert in 2 years with a broken foot. I mean, he doesn't just have a broken foot. He's got fucking like a bionic leg by the looks of things. Interesting video as well. Soulfly featuring Fear Factory's Dino Cazares video of Fresno concert. So I watched a few clips of this. It's pretty much what you would expect. But one thing I was interested to see was whether they do any Fear Factory covers now that Dino's in the band, because, I mean, most of those old Fear Factory songs, not Fear Factory songs, sorry, those old Soulfly songs, they somehow made their way onto some of those Fear Factory song riffs. But anyway, the answer to my question is yes, they do they do those covers, or they do a cover of Replica, I think. It's actually surprisingly good. It has a real, swagger to it, a real groove, all the way up to the clean vocals, which is where, for some reason, they decided that Dino needed to sing it. And believe you me, it's some of the worst shit that you will ever hear in your entire life. And in fairness, it wasn't something that Burton could ever pull off live either. I've seen Fear Factory play live twice, and both times his clean vocals were abysmal. I think the only time I've ever seen that song done justice live as far as the melodies are concerned, surprisingly enough, is when I saw Jamie Jaster and Howard Jones from formerly of Killswitch Engage do it together. I thought that sounded very, very cool. All right, let's move on. Ted Nugent, Neil Young is a complete punk who's saying stupid things. Is Neil Young a complete punk? I think he's a fucking asshole. But then again, I think Ted Nugent is a bit of an asshole as well. And unfortunately, here's the difference between the two. I think that Neil Young actually has some great songs, but the Nuge not so much. Neil Young has got Old Man. He's got Keep on Rockin' in the Free World. He's got great music. But I've never been a fan of Ted Nugent, and as I discovered when I listened to his new single, American Campfire, which actually, let me look for it. As a matter of fact, no, let me talk about what I wanted to talk about here first and foremost. So obviously this is all to do with Spotify, Joe Rogan, and things we've discussed on this podcast already that I don't necessarily want to talk about again. But Alan Averill on his podcast last week touched on something that I've been thinking about as well. I think we were in lockstep with our thoughts there. And that is the fact that, this whole Joe Rogan thing, a guy who talks on talks shit for a living, basically, and is on a podcast, on a platform where you physically have to opt in to listen to him, is getting an awful lot of people to be distracted by some of the real crazy shit that's going on in the world. I mean, we can talk about Russia and the Ukraine, which if Russia were to invade or take any sort of action against Ukraine and Europe take action back against them, the consequences are going to be disastrous for all of us. There's that, closer to home or more immediately, it's things like the inflation rate, which the government tries to tell us in the US is 7.5%. But, you need only take a cursory glance at things like the price of gasoline, the price of electricity, etc., to realize that that's not the case whatsoever. And in reality, a lot of the things that we're seeing right now, the skyrocketing price of electricity, the skyrocketing price of petrol, the fact that we're all being taxed to fucking come and gone. It is all down to just government incompetence. And I don't know whether it's government competence or incompetence by design, or whether they just are fucking stupid and they count on the fact that the population is so numbed by all of the distractions around them, including, getting your knickers in a twist about this sort of thing, that they just won't pay any attention to it. It is also, when you talk about it from that perspective and you talk about, how human beings generally allow themselves to get distracted and waylaid, or society allows itself to get distracted and waylaid about stuff that in the grand scheme of things makes absolutely no difference, to anybody's quality of life or anybody's future prosperity or the prosperity of their future generations. It doesn't surprise you then that, wokeness as a form of mental illness continues to accelerate. And on that note, I found a real gem that I wanted to share with all of you guys. So this is a lady, I believe her name is Carol Adams. She was at Oxford Union talking about veganism. Listen to what this absolute fucking simpleton had to say about eating meat.
Corpses is a racist belief. How do you know the animal would have picked you to feed off their corpse? 21st century animal eating requires our complicity in a new colonialism. These events especially affect girls and young women. Your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny. Popular culture is flooded with references to sexy cows, sexy pigs, sexy chickens, sexy fishes, who all just want to have fun. Meat eating is also one of the ways gender-based structures of oppression are perpetuated.
Anyway, you guys get the point. I mean, this is the sort of shit that, if somebody had shown you this 10 years ago, you would have thought that this is straight out of The Naked Gun. This is like the sharp end of social satire. But not so much anymore. This is now, what is regarded as intellectual discussion in the hallowed halls of Oxford Union. What an absolute fucking joke. But yeah, like I said, I mean, free speech is, of course, a very important thing to talk about, and I do think there's a precedent being set by the Joe Rogan saga, which I've spoken about. But there's an awful lot of things in the world that is way, way, way more, important and has far greater impact and consequence on us than, whether Joe Rogan remains rich on Spotify or whether he gets off Spotify and goes and gets rich either on another platform or on or by himself. Because frankly, I mean, the dude is so well off now. You could just do what I do, open up a Spreaker account, and the guy would be fucking loaded. Now, one thing that I mentioned is this gap between this delta in musical quality between Neil Young and Ted Nugent. And I must confess, I hadn't actually ever really listened much to Ted Nugent's music. I know people, talk about Cat Scratch Fever and all the old shit from the 70s. Whether that's any good, I don't know. But I saw that his new singles were dropping like it's hot on Blabbermouth. And so I had to listen to this Everybody Loves the American Camp, or the song is just called American Campfire, off of his forthcoming masterpiece, Detroit Muscle. Now check this shit out. I'll play a little snippet.
Everybody loves the American campfire. Don't you hear it calling your name? Everybody loves the American campfire. Don't you hear it calling your name?
So if you're listening to this and you've not seen it yet, do yourself a favor and for sure go and have a watch of the music video, because it starts off with him. I mean, just random pseudo patriotic bullshit, and then him sitting in a living room somewhere with his acoustic guitar strumming it for some strangers. But anyway, let's listen to what else the song has to offer up.
Everybody loves the American campfire. Go ahead and fan the flames.
And then he's got video clips of a barbecue as well, which I thought was, I mean, just randomly out of nowhere, there's just some stock footage of somebody turning over a piece of meat on the grill, naturally in the name of misogyny, if that woman is to be believed.
Gather round, children, the party is on. Family and friends are here. Pull up a stump and set yourself down. Let me buy you all a beer.
Holy fuck. I mean, you guys have probably all seen, if you keep up to date with any sort of comedy, that clip of Chris D'Elia saying, "Don't push him to the right." This shit is pushing me to the left. I mean, hearing that fucking song makes me want to color my hair blue, quit my job, steal a copy of Das Kapital, and go and burn down a government building. I mean, it is absolutely atrocious. If somebody had played that to you and said that was something out of South Park, I would be, yeah, absolutely, that's fucking hysterical. Boy, that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they sure have them a sense of humor. So yeah, you can call Neil Young a punk, Ted Nugent, but unfortunately, when it comes to music, he has you beat. Anyways, for a podcast that's primarily about black metal and death metal, spending 7 minutes talking about fucking Neil Young and Ted Nugent is also probably not the smartest idea by me, but I love doing this new segment, as you probably have all picked up. It's the one part of the podcast where I feel I can kind of let rip with no consequence. By which I mean I'm obviously not going to sit here and say stuff that's going to land me in trouble, but I try and just kind of let loose and have fun. And hopefully you guys enjoy it too, which actually seems to be the case. A lot of people are saying that they look forward to this part of the podcast most. Which, if it's not so, then please skip it and accept my apologies in advance. But if you do like it, then great. This is the last one I'll do, and then I'll wrap up. Cannibal Corpse's Corpse Grinder disagrees with Chris Barnes about the state of death metal. The scene couldn't be better. Cannibal Corpse singer George Corpsegrinder Fisher has seemingly taken issue with Chris Barnes' recent comment about the state of the death metal genre, saying the scene is just as great as it's ever been. I'm not really going to go through everything he says there. Most of it is just incoherent nonsense, but I will agree with him. I think Barnes was giving his opinion, but opinions are one thing. I do take issue with a lot of these so-called legends who seem to get off on running their mouth about how terrible the scene is, and Barnes isn't the only one. Nocturno Culto of Darkthrone, last year when Eternal Fails came out, was telling everybody about how the black metal scene has lost its spirit. There are countless videos of Thomas Gabriel Fisher, a man whose music I respect. I love Triptychon, I love Celtic Frost, love Hellhammer. But he's warbling on there for fucking 6 minutes on an interview about how he doesn't feel the fire in modern metal anymore. Points to Obscura as somehow the flag bearers for extreme music. And then goes on about how it's too perfect. Metal music for me is about smashing an amplifier. The way he speaks, like everything, like the world stands still when a word comes out of his mouth. And again, all due respect to him as a musician, all due respect to him as a songwriter. But, and I know a couple of people who know him and say he's a great dude. I've met him, got on with him reasonably well, but he just comes across very often as a blowhard and a pompous fucking prick. And, why I take real umbrage with, these old guys going on about how shit the scene is. I mean, for starters, I've said this before, if you can't hear anything good that's coming out in the scene right now, then either you can't afford a fucking internet connection, or you're going deaf, or you're just not trying hard enough. But whether you want to talk about the spirit of the old stuff or not, I mean, yes, it had a specific kind of vibe, and that vibe was great. But creatively, in terms of the variety that you have and just the sheer volume of just phenomenal music that comes out every single year, for somebody whose best days are well and truly behind them, and I talk about Barnes here, about Nocturno Culto, arguably Thomas Fisher, because it's been years since he's brought out a Triptychon record. I just feel like it's a real insult, and you're really kind of spitting in the face of younger musicians who, in many ways, were influenced by you, and secondly, are doing their damnedest to honor your legacy. So, like I said, that's why I don't like it. I think it's pathetic, frankly. And I tell you one thing that I would love on this podcast is to have some fucking jackass come and try and debate me on that point, because there's some stuff that I'm willing to concede on. Whether it's, and I think this is maybe why the freestyle format of the podcast works, because I've always taken the approach that if somebody can convince me otherwise, or somebody can give me a piece of information that I didn't know before, then I'm willing to revisit an issue. And that's true of politics, it's true of a lot of things. But when it comes to this point, in the words of a great Seinfeld character, there can be no debate. What is coming out right now is outstanding, and what came out then that was great, it had its place. But I'm very sorry, you are a fucking absolute dripping, stinking, sweaty penis if you think otherwise. And that, my friends, wraps up the news for this week. Thank you so much if you've stuck around until the very end. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I will be back next week, same time, same place. My guest is Brock Van Dyke of Panzerfaust, a very spicy conversation. I hope that you enjoyed my chat with the guys from the Amenta, Cain and Tim, and hopefully they'll be back on at some point soon. If you've not yet checked out Revelator, make sure that you do. And that wraps it up for this week. Stay safe, stay healthy. I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week. I am playing out with one of my favorite tracks currently. This is American Campfire by Ted Nugent. I'm just fucking around, of course. This is Genesis Undone by Hell Militia. See you guys next week.